Have you denounced evil today, Michael?
Evil. Which
Wait, why not?
That's all I do all day.
Fuck. You don't care about people.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, you hate people. How long have you been an anti-Semite? Well,
since Ben Shapiro called Ron Paul an anti-Semite.
Fuck, man. If you don't denounce the evils of Hamas, you are an anti-Semite. You're supporting Hamas. You're an anti-Semite, and you are. I was called a soulless ghoul on Twitter by someone who was on my show, by David Bernstein, which I could see coming for a while because I saw David posting before this happened several times stuff about Israel that I don't agree with. He's a Zionist, which is fine, but like the Zionists don't like me. So he found out about me and he started calling me names. And this is a professor at George Mason University and a very esteemed intellectual whose book on racial classification in the United States is awesome. And I said so. But anyway, Israel, and I've known this since I was a kid because growing up in Berkeley, there were a lot of left-wing Jews here. And my father told me this. He said, you'll have these like socialist, pro-Black Panther Jews who are left-wing, are pure left-wing on every single issue except Israel, which is when they tend to want to bomb Palestinian children. I mean, literally, they call for that when things like this happen. So, which is what's happening now. They've called for bombing the city of Gaza, which has lots of children in it. We'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, so it has an amazing ability, the issue of Israel, to what? I mean, I don't want to warp people's minds, to cause them to
activate the lizard brain.
And then it's like, and I'm talking about almost entirely. I mean, I've had these arguments with Israelis, but generally speaking, it's with American Jews who have never lived in Israel, will never live in Israel, who are completely secular, usually. They're the ones with their hearts. Actually, my arguments with Israelis tend not to get heated. They tend to be sort of like, I've heard it before. They shoot at us. I don't care what you say. But the American Jews, those are the ones who get very worked up about Israel, as you can see with Barry Weiss, who's out there like making sure we all know just how evil Hamas is, and our friend Batya Ungar-Sargon. I mean, I knew she was a Zionist, so I'm not surprised. But she's also out there making sure that we all acknowledge how evil Hamas is, and if we don't do that, or not if we don't do that, that's apparently all that needs to be done right now. This is one of the many, many frustrating things about this. Now, the good thing is I've been in this business I've been publicly commenting, writing about, teaching about Israel and Palestine for about 20 years now. And, you get used to it. It's as par for the course. I mean, even the current horrific terrorist attacks against civilians, followed by bombardment of entire city blocks filled with women and children. This has happened before. I mean, even not long ago. And it's happened multiple times. I mean, just in Gaza, just since 2006, that whole cycle. I mean, this was more dramatic. I mean, the Hamas action was certainly more deadly. I mean, they killed more Israelis probably than ever before, except during the two big wars, 67 and 73. This is the biggest non-war casualty rate by any Palestinian organization against Israelis. Now, the thing is that the body counts have always been about 10 or 100 to 1. When the fighting starts or when it's over, Israel almost always kills 10 to 100 as many Palestinians as there are dead Israelis. But anyway, so let's talk about like first how people are talking about this, because I think that's the most, in some ways, important thing. Actually, it's how we all as Americans or Israelis or Jews or whatever you choose to be think about this thing, because Israel lives or dies depending on its relations with everyone else in the world. So, and Israel has always been quite aware of this, and that's why it has such a huge lobby in the United States and so many very wealthy, powerful people who support it all the time. It's because they know that They are wholly dependent. They are this little tiny Jewish ethno-state in the middle of an Arab-Muslim sea. And they've known that since 1947. And they were warned about that since 1947. If you continue to have this island that's exclusive of Arab Muslims in the middle of 65 million of them, you're going to live in perpetual war. That's what George Marshall said to Harry Truman in 1948 when they were debating whether to recognize Israel. That's what he was the Secretary of Defense. That's what James Forrestal said to Harry Truman. He was the Secretary of State at the time. Harry Truman's cabinet, when this all happened, when Israel was founded, were split. And actually, most of his cabinet and the highest ranking members like Marshall and Forrestal, Defense and State, said, don't do it, Henry. They said, we are going to be invested in perpetual war. And Arabs are going to want to kill Americans, and it will never stop because the Jews don't understand this. They refuse, the Zionists don't understand this. He said, Forrestal at one point said, what do you not understand? It's 500,000 Jews in an ocean of 65 million Arabs. But anyway, of course, we know what happened. Harry Truman did recognize it. And then we'll tell the history of this in a course that we just announced today at Unregistered Academy. It's going to be a one-class course. I'm going to present the whole history of Israel and the Palestine conflict. It'll be a one-stop shopping for people who want to get the most sophisticated yet accessible take on this. And we'll do the history and we'll do the contemporary politics of it. And if anybody knows how I conduct my interviews on Unregistered, you will know, or have you ever taken a class with me, you will know that I will steelman every argument that has been relevant in this issue. So I will present the strongest arguments on behalf of the state of Israel, on behalf of waging war against the various Palestinian organizations over the years. And I will also present the strongest arguments against the existence of the state of Israel and on behalf of the Palestinian people, etc. So, and if you know my work, you know that I will do that, and you know I will do it well. So that's what this course will be. And of course, anytime you talk about Israel and Palestine in particular, it is just so hard to find anyone who talks about it in that way. It is just so partisan. It is maybe the most partisan issue. And most people who are dug in at all, who are invested in it, are not going to listen. So this course is most likely for people who know maybe some things about Israel and Palestine and have some ideas and some thoughts, but they need a lot of the information filled in, the gaps filled in. So that's what it's going to be for. And what I will do is, again, I will present the best arguments on all sides, not just one side. That's terrible history. It's no way to understand it. And it's just contrary to my fundamental beliefs about how social change happens, which is social progress happens just through the open exchange of ideas, which is what I'm all about. Anyway, so how people have talked about this is actually the very first thing I thought about when Saturday morning happened. There was one of the very first things that happened after Hamas drove the bulldozer through the fence and the paragliders landed and started shooting people at the festival. I mean, within hours, there was a debate on the right about what to say about this, which I found fascinating. And I had wondered about this, and I knew about some of it, but it really, all of a sudden, since Saturday morning, the whole American political landscape just shifted like a relief map. You know, like you can just see like there's new divisions happening. All of a sudden you can see, oh, wait, we're not friends anymore. We're not, oh, that person over there. Yeah, we probably aren't going to talk anymore. You know, like, I mean, I don't know what David Bernstein and Batya are going to think about me. Whether they would be willing to work with me from now on. I mean, that's how these things operate. Again, I don't know. They haven't said anything like that. And they certainly are not people who tend to be like that, especially not Batya.
Well,
but yeah.
It's funny, the soulless ghoul comment. I've been seeing a lot of like people really enraged and making very charged tweets online. And then I listen to their podcasts and they sound very, very reasonable. I think like the medium of Twitter, again, is that a lot.
Yeah. People People are dumber, and of course less nuanced on Twitter. It reduces everyone's IQ by a few points. I mean, and yeah, and then of course it also encourages sort of emotional volatility. But so the right wing, I noticed all of a sudden the entire Fox network world, that piece of the conservative world, of course, kill Hamas, off with their heads, finish the job, words like that. And then MAGA. I'm sorry to say, again, this shouldn't be a surprise because Sheldon Adelson was one of Trump's main supporters, and he is basically the wealthiest and most powerful member of the so-called Jewish lobby in the United States, funded massively political campaigns for decades that were pro-Israel. And Trump, of course, moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, which was an extremely provocative act, and he was claimed to, and Jared Kushner was very, very tight. In fact, what's the deal with Jared Kushner's family was friends with Benjamin Netanyahu, and Benjamin Netanyahu slept in Jared Kushner's bed when Kushner was a child. Kushner had to sleep on the couch or whatever, or maybe, slept in the third bedroom of his own. But anyway, to let Bibi sleep in his bed. This is how close. So shouldn't be a surprise that MAGA, plus they're not real big fans of like brown skinned people who shoot white people, no matter what the context. They're going to take not that side. So anyway, yeah, so that they came out against it. But then I don't know if you saw this, but there was a huge, still is, raging controversy about Bronze Age Pervert and his relationship with Israel.
Oh, do you understand that?
Nick Fuentes was the leader of this. I listened to Fuentes talk on a Twitter space, and it was fascinating. I didn't know about this, but he has the goods on Kostan Alamaru, who is Bronze Age Pervert, who apparently has extensive connections to Zionists and Zionist organizations, pro-Israel groups and people, and then also, I guess, I haven't really looked into this, but apparently he has said things either in defense of Israel or against Palestinians. I mean, actually, I've heard him say something about Palestinians. That's right. It might even be in this book. We teach the book. There's a course on the book on Bronze Age mindset at Unregistered Academy. And he does mention the Palestinians. I don't think he talks about Israel, though, as an issue in the book. So that's why I was taken by surprise by this. But I guess elsewhere, he has essentially taken the side of Israel. Do you know anything about this, Mr. Weimer?
Oh, I don't know about him personally, but the argument about whether his philosophy would support Hamas as like this vitalist, Bronze Age,
masculine,
hyper-masculine,
pirate ethos.
Yeah,
loves the pirates.
Yeah, I know that philosophical debate that's happening about how people think that this is a failure of his ideology, that these savages are breaking through and it's causing nothing but trouble. But from what he's said personally, it's just like a very rudimentary reading of who he is.
So it turns out that Nick Fuentes is the only true right-wing conservative in this country. To support the state of Israel cannot be conservative because the thing was established in 1948. Not exactly antiquity. And there's other obvious reasons it should not be supported by anybody who's like a true paleo Burkean conservative.
I've got the Pat Buchanan clip at the ready.
Right, exactly.
Pat Buchanan was amazing on this 14 years
Pat
ago.
Understood.
Yeah.
Ron Paul sure understood and still understands. Scott Horton once told me, Scott is a guy whose whole life has been driven by a hatred of U.S. foreign policy, and he's devoted his entire life to like channeling that hatred into his critiques of it. But he once told me, he said, you know how much I fucking hate the Pentagon and the United States, but I fucking hate Israel. There is a good old fashioned right wing anti-Zionism that is still alive. There's some flickering embers of it, and I just named the 3 or 4 people who are part of that. But boy, we now found out who's the real N-word in among conservatives. Nick Fuentes, I never took him that seriously. I always thought he was kind of smart and interesting, just sort of a flamethrower. But he actually had quite an extensive critique of this, and he talked not just about BAP, but about a lot of sort of the so-called dissident right being essentially in bed with Zionists and essentially being supporters of the Israel lobby and Israel generally against the Palestinians. And I didn't know that. I assumed the dissident right would have been certainly critical of Israel, since they tend to be anti-Semitic.
No.
How does the anti? Oh no.
Well, like you take Gavin, for instance, he was like radicalized by 9/11. A lot of them got into politics, I don't know, through 9/11 or through anti-immigration stances.
Yeah.
And I mean, originally it used to be dissident right to say, hey, these Muslims...
Gavin McInnes, for those who don't know, Gavin McInnes, the notorious founder of the Proud Boys. Yeah. Anyway. Yep. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, it used to be like the whole, like back when liberals loved Muslims, like that's what dissident right used to be. It used to be, we can't let these Muslims invade Europe. We can't let them, we have to completely destroy ISIS, blah, 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 especially during the Obama administration. So they have a firm Zionist roots, and yeah, a lot of them see this as a white versus black issue.
Oh, well, I mean, they could have just been anti-Palestinian, which would have been more consistent with their philosophy. Embracing Zionism is a different step. I mean, you don't have to, you can hate Palestinians to the hilt and also hate Israel. And in fact, in terms of the organizations and the state apparatuses, that's a good thing to do, by the way. Not the people, but Palestinian organizations and Israeli organizations and states. The best policy is just to be opposed to all of them. 100%, by the way. There should be no sympathy given, in my view, if you want to live in a healthy world that is going to be less prone to war. The only sensible thing to do is to have zero sympathy for any one of the Israeli or Palestinian para-state organizations. So Hamas, Hezbollah, Palestine Islamic Jihad, which is even worse than Hamas, PIJ, and of course the entire Israeli state, IDF, all that, Mossad. To me, the only reasonable, healthy response to those organizations is to say, fuck off. I mean, all of them, and only care about the civilians. Now, the thing about Israel is that basically no adult in Israel is a civilian, because there's universal conscription. Again, that's what happens when you build a tiny Jewish ethno-state in the middle of an Arab-Muslim ocean. You're going to have to put everybody in the army because you're going to be at constant war. And so every adult, with very few exceptions, is serving or has served in the IDF. They have all carried a gun for the Israeli state. So it's hard to say now. And then I'm getting a little bit into the details here, but these are some of the details that I think people need to know. The area that was attacked directly, where they killed the civilians on the kibbutzim, that whole area is all an illegal settlement. Illegal, and always has been since 1967. Illegal, according to everybody, illegal. In fact, Israel doesn't even deny it. It's occupied territory, but those settlements themselves are illegal according to multiple laws, international law. But the Israeli government nonetheless encouraged these people to go live there, knowing damn well that they were going to be living next to a giant concentration camp of 2 million people. And that's why they were very well armed, by the way. All those kibbutzim along that border of Gaza, super well armed. Everybody had been in the military. They had really good security service. And that's one of the things Hamas is saying. They absolutely killed civilians, don't get me wrong. But what they were mostly doing, and the reason there was so much shooting and killing in that area was that there are lots and lots of soldiers or ex-soldiers with guns, because it's a settler community. And if you know anything about Israel, you know that the settlers in those territories are the most fanatical Zionists of all. The other thing people should know is that Sderot, which is where the first worst attack happened, and where they hit the kibbutz and killed a bunch of people, and etc., and where the music festival was, Sderot, northeast of Gaza, immediately. There's a hill in Sderot, right next to Gaza, that overlooks Gaza. And during the last 2 bombardments of Gaza, which killed 2,000 or 3,000 Palestinians and about 1,000 kids, Israeli settlers from that area would go take lawn chairs up to the top of that hill and watch the bombs drop and watch buildings explode. And there was video put out about this. They were proud of it. Every Palestinian knows about that. Again, pretty important to understand why so much anger. I mean, why such animalistic anger? And it's animalistic. I mean, I think they sort of intended that. It was not as animalistic as it has been made out to be. By the way, the whole beheaded 40 children, babies story, completely made up. It's been debunked 29 times. They're still using it. Meghan McCain this morning just yelled at AOC about it. You know, why are you not denouncing the beheading of 40 babies? Well, because it hasn't happened, AOC. I mean,
yeah, Biden repeated it.
Then Biden said he saw pictures of it.
Yeah.
But yet the IDF itself has said, no, we have no evidence. IDF twice has officially stated we have no evidence of that.
Which is like classic boomer brain. Like, of course I know JFK got killed. I saw it happen on TV. Of course I know he went to the moon. I saw it happen on TV. Like,
well, the thing is, it's not boomer. It's racism. I mean, you have to assume that that's what happened. You have to assume that Palestinians are animalistic to begin with. I believe him. I believe him in that. I think he implanted a memory of him seeing images of it, and that he heard it and incorrectly repeated it. Oh.
And was watching a bunch of TV, and that he had that. Like, I think he, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's both a cognitive issue with our elderly president, but it's also racism. I think it's not just him; it's everybody who's saying this over and over again. But it's the assumption. Then they get mad at you when you challenge it. It's like, wait, I don't think that did happen. How dare you? You're evil. It's like, wait, you want this to have happened? You prefer this to have happened? You want me to be wrong? What? What is that about?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone, stop and examine that. Why is everyone mad at me? And this is what's been happening for 3 days now on Twitter. Me and several other people, we get screamed at when we say there's no evidence for this. Like, they'd rather I say this is actually, they'd rather it be real and true. 40 beheaded babies. Does this turn you on? Pro-Israelis? What the? Quite macabre. I mean, yeah. But the so yeah. Go ahead.
Well, claims like that, especially graphic rapes and graphic murders and mutilations of children.
Yeah, it started with mass rape. That's what it started. That was the first claim, was mass rape.
Yeah.
Zero evidence. None. Not a shred. Nothing. Except 2 statements by 2 people. Right.
But it follows a long history of atrocity propaganda where where the worst thing that you could ever possibly imagine, like, since antiquity, wars have been fought over stuff like this, and
women, children. That's it. It's always women. It's always they're raping women and killing children. Every war begins with those claims. Every fucking one of them. And almost always they're wrong. I used to buy it, by the way. I used to think that mass rape was sort of standard practice in war. It's actually quite rare. It has certainly happened, but it's definitely happened. But the way it's portrayed, like in the Ukraine war, I mean, my God, both sides have been calling mass rape on the other for decades now. I mean, on a regular basis.
And also men. Usually in war, it's men who get raped for humiliation as prisoners of war. That happens a lot too. That doesn't get, I
don't know. Yeah, I mean, the Russian military, I'm sure, is not my kind of place to be. Not my cup of tea. I mean, but a lot of this stuff is just exaggerated. War atrocities on all sides is always exaggerated, of course, for obvious reasons, you know.
And we're 33 years to the day, October 10th, 1990, that that woman came on and said the whole Kuwaiti babies and incubators incident happened. That was completely fabricated.
Right.
Yeah.
There were two pretexts for the Iraq War. One was the WMDs, which we all know was bullshit. But the other big one was that woman claiming that Saddam's forces ripped babies out of incubators and threw them on the floor and stomped on their heads or something.
Yeah,
and everyone believed it. And everyone believed it. And you were yelled at. I was yelled at the time for saying, where's the evidence for this? What? How dare you? How dare you not think that there are smashed head babies all over the place? So weird that they insist on that being true.
And I see the argument already breaking out in the comments right now. We're not saying that no civilians and no children and no babies at all.
I've said it 4 times. Yeah. I've said it multiple times. They absolutely killed many. We don't know how many, but many, many civilians. Yeah, I think about that like killing any civilians. What I'm saying is the big meta argument is this is a war, and it's been a war for decades, at least since 2006, since they closed off the entire area. It's the other thing people need to understand. Since 2006, there have been 2 ways to exit Gaza, one in Rafah in the south, which Egypt blocked, and one in the north, which Israel controls. And you can only leave that exit if you're Palestinian, if you have a work permit to work during the day and then come back at night. It's a prison. And David Cameron, the former prime minister of the United Kingdom, said it was an open air prison. He said it was the largest open air prison in the world. So this is not some radical fringe idea. It is. I mean, it's really impossible to deny this. Do people know where Gaza gets all of its water, food, and electricity and internet connection? Israel controls all of it. All of it. And what did Israel do on Saturday night? Cut off all of it. Food, electricity, gone. You know, so there are hospitals full of dying people right now, guaranteed to die. There are people all over Gaza right now missing limbs. They will not be able to get treated. Imagine that. Imagine walking around for a few days with a blown off leg, and no bandage. I mean, that's what we're talking about, because the hospital stopped functioning. The main hospital last night, I think, stopped. The electricity went out. They were done. The main energy generator. Sorry, the main energy generator in Gaza. They only have one independent generator. It's gone last night. So it's going to be thousands. Every time they do this, it's always in the thousands for Palestinians. Half of the Gaza population, again, this is another key fact, is children. Half. There's 2 to 2.5 million people in Gaza. Half are under 18. Half. And remember, they cannot leave. Remember, they have no air force, no real artillery to speak of. They have these rockets they put together every once in a while out of fucking water pipes. But Israel, of course, can do whatever it wants. And Israel has a nuclear bomb. If Israel wanted to, it could, and with complete impunity, yes, turn it into glass, which many people have called for in Israel. They could turn all of Gaza into glass in an instant. It's nothing. I mean, they can bomb, they can kill anyone in Gaza at any moment they want with complete impunity. I mean, except for the odd terrorist attack, like just what just happened. That's the only punishment they receive, the only consequence they receive. And, you know, I'm sure everybody or most people watching have seen, I hope they've seen the pictures and the videos of Gaza, the destruction. Not now, I'm talking about in the past. I mean, I'm talking about leading up to this. I mean, entire blocks leveled, just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of homes, houses leveled, apartment blocks leveled, and thousands of people dead. And half of them are always children. Half are children. They've already killed more kids. They've already killed more Palestinians than were killed, Palestinian children, than were killed on Saturday, for sure. Oh, for sure. It's just going to keep going. The other key point people need to understand about what's happening is what's happening in Israeli politics, which was all the news recently. No one was even talking about Palestinians and the conflict. That conflict recently was all about what was going on inside of Israel. Mass protests against Netanyahu, corruption charges that could put him in prison. And a lot of people are saying in Israel that he has a real chance of going to prison, like a better chance than Trump of going to prison. Netanyahu, the guy running. He put together this coalition government, and this is the most important thing, that is running things, and it's the most right-wing government in the history of the world. Meaning, it's as right-wing as Nazi Germany, because it's absolutely, avowedly, it's racist. It doesn't even pretend to abide by any international conventions about the existence of the Palestinian state, or really the Palestinian people. Netanyahu gave an address to the UN last month in September, and he held up a map. It said on it, the new Middle East. And it showed a map of the Middle East with no Gaza on it, with no West Bank on it, with no Palestine on it. And he went on about how this was the future of the Middle East. So his coalition government has made it very clear they want to eliminate these people. And that is probably why they bombed the southern crossing. Egypt was going to let some Palestinians escape from Gaza on Saturday, but Israel immediately on Saturday bombed that crossing. So you're really trapped. Oh, the ocean? Yeah, the Mediterranean's right there. That's true. But you can't go more than, I think it's 500 yards off the coast before the Israeli Navy will shoot you out of the water. They are trapped in an open air concentration camp that's 5 miles wide and 25 miles long. It's the size of New Jersey. Half of them are children. It's illegal occupied territory. Norman Finkelstein said, "What do you expect them to do?" I don't know. And I'm not anti-Israel. I'm not pro-Hamas or Hezbollah. I'm not even necessarily pro-Palestinian, whatever that means. What I'm saying is the whole project, my argument, again, it's what's important is what Americans think, really. Because if America stops funding and supporting Israel, Israel might end. Probably will end. But what my argument is, and I wrote an article for the Daily Beast about this many years ago, people can look it up, is that it's been a losing proposition, a self-destructive project, not for Palestinians, for Jews. And I'm a quarter Jewish, and my mother's Jewish, and my son is Jewish, and half my friends are Jewish, and I was raised among Jews. And it's self-destructive for Jews and Americans by us supporting it. Because as I said at the beginning of the show, as James Forrestal, the Secretary of State, and George Marshall, the Secretary of Defense, famous George Marshall, said, it's a little Jewish ethno-state island in the middle of an ocean, Arab Ocean. And you're going to have endless war, endless conflict, endless reason. People will have endless reason to hate you and want to thwart you and want to cut off your oil supply and want to wreak havoc in any way they can, which is exactly what has happened since 1948, with no interruption, basically. It has been essentially nonstop war since 1948. It's a completely militarized society, Israel. As I said, everyone is drafted. There's a particular Israeli personality that is quite militaristic, I think. And that's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. These are people who must always live at war. Even in Tel Aviv, which is a very Western, European, modern city, right in the middle of the country. It's not not really near Gaza. It's like an hour and a half drive. It's a small country, but still, it's not like right next to it. Even there, they can get rockets. They have had rockets, many rockets shot and fired into Tel Aviv. And I have friends who live in Tel Aviv, who are professors at Tel Aviv University. And it's their choice. They're Americans. I know Americans who live who chose to repatriate to Israel. And what do you say to that? It's like, why don't you move to a safe neighborhood instead? Like the United States, no Jew in the United States, last I checked, was killed by an Arab terrorist. None. Whereas in Israel, 15,000 have been killed. 15,000 Israelis have been killed by Palestinians who don't want a Jewish ethno-state in their neighborhood, displacing them. Gaza is made up of the descendants of the refugees from 1948, the Palestinians who were pushed out in 1948 out of Israel by the Zionists. A third of the Palestinians who were pushed out went to Gaza. And some of them are still alive, actually. Some of the 48, they call them 48 Arabs in Gaza. But a lot of mostly it's their descendants, and by now we're talking about great-great-grandchildren, because again, Gaza is a place of children. So that's, again, refugees, occupied territory, illegal occupied territory, concentration camp, walled off. No one's allowed to leave. And they're firing artillery and dropping bombs on blocks and blocks and houses and apartment buildings. As Norman Finkelstein said, what do you expect them to do? So,
what do you think about the potential strategy that Hamas is employing here? Like, what's their end game? Because it seems illogical to pick a fight with Israel in this way and to lose so much international support. The most coherent strategy I've heard laid out is that they intentionally did this to provoke a response to undo all the peace treaties and peace talks between Saudi Arabia and other Arab nations that happened under the Trump administration, and to repolarize the world against Israel and their overreaction.
Well, that that dovetails with the most fascinating conspiracy theory of the day, which I didn't get from Der Stürmer. I didn't get it from Nick Fuentes. I got this conspiracy theory from Haaretz, which is basically the New York Times of Israel. I think it's Israel's oldest newspaper. It's very well established, very liberal to left, and Israel has a huge left and liberal class. Haaretz has been writing, and not just one article, publishing multiple articles since Saturday about how two things. Netanyahu and Israel generally, but especially Netanyahu over the last 20 years, has deliberately and explicitly promoted Hamas in various ways. And he has said openly to 2019, he said to his cabinet, the best way to undermine the Palestinian state, because remember, that's his position. He wants to do away with the Palestinian state entirely and take over Gaza and the West Bank. He wants to remove those people and take them over entirely. He said the best way to thwart the Palestinian state is to promote Hamas. And then he's done that through multiple policies. And Haaretz has, everyone should check this out. Go to Haaretz, Haaretz. They have multiple articles about Netanyahu and Hamas in the last few days. So Hamas, and many people who are knowledgeable about this will tell you that Israel created Hamas for that very reason. To split from Fatah in the West Bank, to split the Palestinian movement generally, right? Divide and conquer. And again, to basically frame the Palestinians as agents of Iran. But yeah, many very knowledgeable people, this is not even very controversial, will say that Hamas is the creation of Israel, but especially Netanyahu. Now that right there is a mind blower. But then think about what everyone was saying on Saturday morning, which was, how in the world did this happen? Yeah. Israeli intelligence? Like, has anyone seen Fauda? Phenomenal Israeli series. My son and I love it. We're big fans, even though I'm not a fan of what it's about. But it's about this elite commando team that also sort of works with Israeli intelligence. And it's not just Mossad. I mean, they have this world famous, right, intelligence services that are, apparently like the cream of the crop, like even better than the CIA and the NSA. And they know everything that goes on inside of Gaza, especially because Gaza is enclosed and they have informants. Max Blumenthal has said that there are Israeli informants just honeycombing Gaza. They're everywhere. how on earth did they not know about the bulldozer and the paragliders and the hundreds of rifles and the men in formation and training and and all the people who must have been talking about this to plan for, and must have been a very long process of planning for it. Although, you know what, it could have actually been started on Thursday, because do you know what happened last Thursday? No one mentions this. One of the most radical and provocative anti-Palestinian, anti-Muslim acts by both the Israeli government and Jewish settlers, which was 800 of the most radical settlers, Jewish settlers, stormed into the Al-Aqsa Mosque, protected by the IDF or Israeli police. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is the third most important Islamic holy site in the world. After Mecca and Medina, there is Al-Aqsa. You know, in Gaza, in West Bank, among Palestinians, Al-Aqsa is like a big, big word because of that. You see Al-Aqsa this, Al-Aqsa that, including the Al-Aqsa brigades, who just killed some of you and for doing that. And I bet that did happen. I bet that some of those settlers who were in Al-Aqsa on Thursday are now dead. It wasn't just killing children. It wasn't primarily about that at all. In war, everyone dies. This is why I'd like to end the war and end support for our part in this war. But yeah, it's remarkable. So how did Israeli intelligence not know about this? But we also know that Netanyahu and the Israeli government created Hamas. And then we also know, get this bombshell from Haaretz, that for the last, what was it, last month, but definitely the last several days before Saturday, the Egyptian government was telling the Israeli government that something big and bad was coming in Gaza. This is in Haaretz. This is in the mainstream media in Israel.
Well, I have an article from the Times of Israel saying that.
Yeah.
But
and the Times, right? Yeah. That's two mainstream media in Israel. This is not fringe at all. This is the mainstream in Israel. This also, by the way, tells you how divided Israelis are about Netanyahu. People hate Netanyahu. That's why half of them are trying to put him in prison. So that's why the media is okay with blaming him for it. This is kind of what the liberal left in Israel is saying about what happened, that not Netanyahu's responsible for it, but they're right. The question is, just how responsible is he? Like, did he actually have a part in this attack? Did he know about it? He did know about it. I mean, they knew something was coming, and yet there was no alert. There was no high alert on the border. Nothing. It's extremely fishy. And of course, Israel, I mean, in terms of scruples, abiding by scruples and in conducting their foreign relations, I mean, they make the CIA look like choir boys. You know, they are quite truly gangster. And in some cases, I don't really blame them because they kind of need to be. But yeah, they don't really give too many fucks historically in this kind of thing. So they are not, I wouldn't put it past them. The thing is, were they willing to sacrifice their own civilians to advance Netanyahu's cause? Because guess what? The whole nation now is rallying around him. Very convenient for him. And he has the best pretext in the world, most importantly, to kill everybody in Gaza and force everybody out. So, I mean, good Lord, I used to... If it's the mainstream in Israel reporting this, then it's not even really a conspiracy theory almost.
Well, the conspiracy theory would be the motivations. So it would be not a conspiracy theory to say he's grossly incompetent and let this slide and then reacted the way anybody would. But the conspiracy theory would be to say that he did what FDR did and he antagonized a certain number of people and then just, weakened the defenses the day he knew an attack was going to happen and then used that for popular support.
FDR wanted to do to the Japanese what Netanyahu wants to do to the Palestinians. Remove them from the map. And both since they were teenagers. In Bibi's case and in Franklin's case, since they were children, they were fantasizing about genocide. Whoa, that's pretty serious. Quite a couple of guys there. Yeah. So the I am now newly disappointed with a lot of people that I previously liked. It's sad. I'm not going to name names. I guess I named two names.
I'll
Go
name
ahead.
Jordan Peterson. I'll name Jordan
Oh
Peterson.
well,
Yeah.
Jordan.
I mean, like, I don't mind it if he's wrong about politics because he's a Canadian professor, and
Sure.
yeah,
Sure.
I don't expect Canadian professors to be smart about politics ever. But like the genocidal rhetoric that guy has been spewing, like dehumanizing genocidal rhetoric, goes absolutely against every good thing he's ever done in his own psychology work. And oh, it's so disappointing. It's like calling people rats, calling people anti-Semitic rats, saying "give them hell, Netanyahu." Like, you are banging war propaganda, genocidal war propaganda. And just because the Jews were victimized in World War II and that happened in the 20th century, and you have some soft spot for the 20th century, doesn't mean that they're always right about everything all the time. And that they're the perpetual victims. It goes completely against everything he taught about victim consciousness and not seeing yourself as a victim. If you see yourself as a victim, you will justify the worst atrocities ever. And he just sees the Israeli people as these perpetual victims that can do no wrong, and that any violence against any of their enemies, any silencing of free speech. Dave Rubin was saying that all the IDF people, I mean, all the IDW people are pretty much IDF people now. But yeah.
With one really amazing exception. I don't know if you saw this little fascinating thing, and it's like I realize my opinion about him just goes zoop, zoop, up and down so radically. Brett Weinstein. You see what he's been doing?
No, I haven't. Well, he's been hard
you
to
remember on Saturday, one of the first things that came out of Israel was this TikTok, I think, video of this woman who was in the IDF intelligence like 20 years ago, saying that this doesn't make any sense, basically putting out the conspiracy theory.
Mm-hmm.
She was the first person to say this. She put out a video saying this doesn't make any sense. There's no way that the IDF didn't know about this coming. The intelligence must have known about this. Anyway, Brett had her on his show.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. And then he did a follow-up. I haven't watched this yet, but he did a follow-up with what's-her-face, his wife, a follow-up video in which I think he brings in the COVID thing, but he's basically, I think he's kind of running with this, that this was Netanyahu's baby, false flag kind of thing. Yeah. So that was fascinating. I mean,
he's a curious guy. He's a sincere, curious guy a lot of times.
He is. Yeah. But anyway, so there's a bunch of interesting, I haven't seen what Sam Harris has to say, but I mean, I know what he would have to say about this. He's not a fan of the Islamic terrorists, and he has very clear ideas about what to do with them, usually nuclear.
I was gonna say, do you see France just outlawed pro-Palestinian protests?
No.
Oh yeah, and nice. Dave Rubin was just applauding that.
Like, did he really?
Yep.
Oh, so did Douglas Murray. Speaking of IDW right-wing pieces of S, that guy is really nasty. Douglas Murray. I don't know if you've checked him out much, but he's quite smart, but he's just so nasty. He is just a mean dude. Anyway, he got up on BBC or one of them today, I think, and he straight up called for arresting, and deporting anyone who is, quote, pro-Hamas. Now, the thing is, I've been called pro-Hamas 55 times in the last 4 days, Douglas. So according to your, there's a very good chance that I would be one of those. Am I pro-Hamas, by the way? Douglas Murray probably would call me pro-Hamas, which means he's calling for the arrest of people like me and you for saying what we're saying. That's Douglas Murray, everyone. He was like the hero, the darling of the intellectual dark web not long ago. On Joe Rogan all the time. Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris did all these huge events with him in London at the O2 Arena. He's on all the media, still does all the media. The IDW was done, except for Brett. Brett's holding out.
To steelman them a little bit, or at least steelman some of the... There is a faction of the left that does celebrate Hamas.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That, like, gleeful. And I think this needs to be talked about, like Black Lives Matter Chicago, like blasting the image of the parasailers, and certain people openly celebrating and calling them liberators and all that. Now, I think they have the right to free speech like anyone else, and and I don't think this conflict involves them at all.
I mean,
but
I don't celebrate it. I don't celebrate what Hamas did. I don't celebrate Hamas in general. But, you know, I also don't celebrate the fact that the Attica prisoners in 1971 killed some prison guards during their prison break. I don't celebrate that, but I can understand why people would. You know, it's a prison. If anyone wants to like challenge the idea that Gaza is a prison, an open air prison, be my guest. But unless you can challenge that, and unless you can challenge somehow the data that it's 50% children, you know, I mean, how many Americans in that situation, if they were forced to live, here's the thing major data point, because of those things, because that means that most people who live in Gaza now have never left Gaza.
Yeah.
They were born there and they've never left, except maybe to work in Jerusalem during the day. But most of them don't even, they only get 10, there's only, I think last I saw 10,000 work permits, 20,000. It's in the tens of thousands out of 2 million people. So nobody gets out, basically. You know, I mean, Americans, if they were in that, if I told you, okay, Joe American, here's your deal. You're born into this open air prison with 2 million other people. By the way, it's more densely populated than Tokyo. Gaza is more densely populated than Tokyo. Yeah, that's what they're dropping bombs on. And it's half children. Can I say that again? So, I mean, if you told an American that, oh, you're going to be born here, half the people will be children, 2 million people, and there's this other country surrounding you that won't let you out, that's now dropping bombs on you and has done this multiple times before. Are you going to like care about politics? Are you going to care about the Oslo Accords? Are you going to care about exactly what happened in 1948? Are you going to care exactly about what the Bible says and who the land belongs to? No, you're really not. And if you were born in that situation, in those surrounding that culture, cut off from the rest of the world also, by the way, never having seen a Jew, remember that, they're not allowed out. So most of those people have never even seen a Jew or an Israeli or anybody else for that matter. So do you think like some anti-Semitism can like fester in their minds? Maybe, perhaps, of course. What do you expect? Like, it would be bizarre if they weren't anti-Semitic at this point. Bizarre. I just don't get it. Like, how can you not at least understand why this happened? Most people who know about this stuff, that I've been listening to and reading in the last few days, have said, I've been waiting for this to happen for a long time. This is completely to be expected. Gaza is the worst place on earth to live, period, full stop. That's it. You cannot find a worse place to live. It's an open air prison, 2 million people, densely packed, half children. It's just ridiculous. So the paragliders, that image that those idiot BLM groups and the Harvard, whatever, pro-Palestine group put out on their flyers, you know, I think to them that represents freedom from prison, getting out, flying out of the prison, which it was. And then, of course, many of those people shot a bunch of civilians, apparently. So I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not going to celebrate any time civilians are killed by anybody ever, no matter what.
Also,
but Jesus Christ.
Why does this one issue hijack the left always? Like every protest you go to might start out as like a union thing, but then the Palestine people always show up and dominate it. Like, what is this? Yeah.
Because of the high number of Jews in the American left. Yeah. And that's it. I mean, because there's so many Jews in the American left. And so, and many, not all, but many of those Jews, of course, have allegiance to Israel. And so and because Israel is also so central in American foreign policy, which is always a hot topic with the left. Every time Israel kills some Palestinians or vice versa, the left has a little fight among itself. And now what's interesting is the right is having a fight. I don't remember the right wing having a fight about this. That's what's new now. That's what I like. So it's interesting. But the left always does it. That's when you see who's liberal and who's leftist. The leftists, Marxists, they generally are pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel, like almost all of them. And by the way, a lot of those are Jews. I mean, the best anti-Israel critics I know, by the way, Norman Finkelstein and Max Blumenthal, for sure. I mean, in terms of pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel, those guys are the best. They're 100% Jewish as shit. Norm's parents both were in concentration camps in Germany. Or in Poland. But so yeah, that's why it splits the left. The liberals are establishment and Israel is a part of the establishment, and Israel, Jews also are very prominent, not just in the left, but they're very prominent in liberal institutions like universities and the media. Those are not left wing so much as liberal. There's some left elements to them, but they're really controlled by liberals. So liberal Jews they're the dominant force in the media and in the universities, and I can very well speak to that. I know exactly how that goes. So those people are all pro-Israel. So you'll get like the left factions sort of saying stuff against Israel, but the people who run the big cultural institutions are either Jewish liberals or married to Jewish liberals.
Universities are all issuing statements in solidarity with all their Jewish people on campus during this trying time. Which is like, I
mean, again, like I'm a quarter Jewish and my son and my mother and blah, blah, blah. Like when something happens in Israel, I never think like, I don't have special feelings about those people dying as opposed to people in Gaza dying or people in Ukraine dying. I mean, it's very weird. I mean, now, it is true a lot of American Jews do know people who live in Israel. So I understand that, of course, caring about those people. But then again, it's like people who choose to live in a very dangerous neighborhood when they don't have to. They're going out of their way. They can afford to live in a nice neighborhood, but they're choosing to live in the ghetto, in the worst neighborhood, one of the worst neighborhoods on earth in terms of death rate. Is Israel. Being a Jew in Israel, as I said, 15,000 are dead because of this project. Israel was supposed to be a safe haven. That was the whole point, right? After the Holocaust and after, millennia of statelessness and pogroms and anti-Jewish hatred around the world, the Jews needed their own nation. So that's why they need this place to be safe. And yet that's exactly where you go to get killed if you're Jewish. And that was proven again on Saturday. 1,000 more. Or 1,000 or more are, added to the total. It's now 16,000. Jesus, right? I didn't even think about that. It's at least 16,000 and growing, who wouldn't be dead if they lived in New York or LA, or really anywhere else, pretty much. So why invest in this project? It makes all those Arabs hate Americans too when we support them, when we support Israel. Al-Qaeda said very, very clearly in its founding statement, we will attack Americans because of American support for the Zionist project. Straight up. And then they did that 2 years later. Then they did attack Americans 2 years later. And they kept, they've made no bones about it. It's like our support for Israel is the number one reason they hate us. And we're getting what out of it? We have energy independence. We don't need the oil anymore. This is insane. We need to just say, good luck. We're not anti-Israel. I'm not anti-Israel. I'm not anti-Zionist. Let them try. Go ahead. You want to have a Jewish ethno-state in the middle of Arab world? Have fun. I just don't want to be a part of it. And that to me is like the only sensible policy on this. I don't understand any other. Everybody gets wrapped up in the sort of the tit for tat, moralizing. This side did that atrocity. That side did this atrocity. It's like back and forth, back and forth, back. No, the whole project to begin with in 1948, as Truman's own people knew and said, is a disaster for everybody. It's just a bad idea. The Jews should have gone elsewhere. And most of them, by the way, did go elsewhere. Most Jews did not live in Israel after World War II. Most Jews were intelligent and moved to Western Europe and the United States, where they've been more than just fine, haven't they, by the way? Not only have they survived and not been victims of pogroms in the United States, they fucking run the part of the place. So, I mean, they're doing just fine over here. What on earth are we supporting this stupid Jewish state for? It's really amazing. And we're getting what for it? The problem is now Israel is working on its what, 6th, 7th, 8th generation. I don't even know. What is it since 1948? It's, you now have great grandchildren of the original settlers living there. And so this is the problem. This is why a lot of people, including me, sort of despair about it. I don't see this really resolving or ending anytime soon at all, or maybe ever, until, again, unless the United States pulls out. But the Israeli culture is now its own entity, its own independent entity. It obviously didn't exist before 1948, but now it very much is a thing, and it's very rooted. And the people there have not known anything other than Israel for generations. So it's really hard to say, oh, we'll leave. What do I say to the great-great-grandchildren of those idiot settlers in 1948, who I think were self-destructive? I mean, you can't blame these kids who live there now. But then again, if they were my children or grandchildren or my nieces and nephews, I would say, listen, here's the situation. Like, it's safer here. Why don't you come live with us? I mean, it's just not, please don't live there. It's a dangerous neighborhood. Like you would tell your nephew or niece if they decided to move to Compton, please don't live there. I care about you. It's not about being pro-Palestinian. Forget about the Palestinians. I'm talking about it's terrible for Jews and Israelis and Americans. Self-destructive. We get we spend $3 billion per year on Israel. That's what we give them every year, $3 billion. And we've been doing that since 1968. So, perennial fun times over there.
Okay.
How's the chat doing?
Yeah, chat's arguing.
How strange about Israel.
Yeah.
Weird.
Mm-hmm. So what you were saying about, like, America is involved in this by our continued support. Nikki Haley said this was an attack on America, and it.
Oh, right.
In a sense, it kind of was, right? Because Israel is kind of a vassal state and a creation of the United States.
Sure. Hamas would tell you that. Hamas would definitely tell you that it was an attack on the U.S. as well. They would agree with her. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then Lindsey Graham is calling this a holy war, and the religious right is, like a lot of people are saying, hey, my pastor this week said, if I don't support Israel, I'm not a Christian. Like, I've been hearing reports of that. And so, America is getting involved in this. They sent 2 aircraft carriers, right, to defend the region, to keep any other Arab countries from getting involved.
Mm-hmm.
There have been warmongers alleging that Russia trained Hamas.
Mm-hmm.
There have been warmongers saying that Iran will certainly be involved and we need to start a preemptive war against Iran.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see this conflict escalating? Do you see Arab nations coming to the defense of Gaza, or a broader conflict in the Middle East breaking out because of this?
I mean, so it's just a fact that those are possibilities. And that's the problem here, is that we have come to a place where those things are all possible. They would not have been possible if certain things hadn't taken place, if there had been different policies, but those things are all possible now. So the thing that I've been nervous about, I guess, especially, is Hezbollah, which is to the north in Lebanon, and which is, I don't know, it's, by all accounts, it's like much, much, much bigger and stronger than Hamas, maybe 5 to 10 times bigger. They both get funding from Iran, but Hezbollah has been Iran's project for decades, since the 1980s. So they're very well established, and they've gotten a lot of training and arms from Iran. Hezbollah is Shia, Hamas is Sunni, but they, again, both get funding from Iran. They do have communications with each other. They used to be in a rivalry, but and Netanyahu's been trying to drive wedges between the two. But if Hezbollah just takes the opportunity, when Israel goes into Gaza on the ground, which is going to happen maybe like right now, it's any minute now, like in the morning, in the next day or two, they're going to almost certainly go in on the ground. And when that happens, if Hezbollah goes in, then it's a two-front war, at least, but it's a two-front war on the south and the north for Israel. And it would be a ground war in the south and the north. There is talk about the Israeli military, the IDF, being quite a bit weaker now than it once was, that it's not the force it used to be. I don't know about that. I've just heard sort of experts on this say that. They've also had a lot of political trouble within the military. A lot of servicemen refused to serve because of Netanyahu and his government. There were strikes in the military this year, I think, just recently. Israelis refusing to serve in the military because of all this stuff. And I think recruitment, I mean, everybody's drafted, but they're just refusing to show up in many cases. So but even apart from Israel's ability to defend against, to conduct a ground invasion of Gaza, which is nothing but house to house fighting, by the way, that is, again, it's more densely populated than Tokyo. So it's the most grinding kind of warfare there is. To do that while you're fighting a land war against Hezbollah in the north. But apart from that, then if that's all to happen, if Israel's on the ground in Gaza and Hezbollah is on the march in the north in Israel, Jesus, then everybody's going to want to be a part of it in some way or another. I mean, Iran will effectively already be a part of it because Hezbollah is sort of a proxy for them. And the United States, of course, always wants to be a part of everything. And I mean, Russia has connections to Iran. Russia is allied with Iran, in fact. And then Syria, holy Christ. Same thing. Syria is allied with Iran and Russia and Hezbollah. And so they have an interest in this. And Syria has a very big battle-tested military that has, in fact, invaded Israel before. And could again. And then Saudi Arabia, and that's really complicated because of all the shifting going on recently with Saudi Arabia. And as you said earlier, I think what's been happening in the last 4 days could be on both sides an attempt to scuttle that new alliance between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Both Netanyahu maybe and Hamas want to ditch that. Don't know yet. That's really complicated. But Saudi's position on this, is also determinative of a lot of what goes on. And we don't know yet what they would do, but Saudi took an official statement that was completely pro-Palestinian over the weekend. An official statement from Saudi that was 100% pro-Palestinian. It was like a lot of people were shocked by it. They didn't pay any lip service whatsoever to Israel or anything. So that's interesting. Don't know even how to read that. But the point is, it almost doesn't even matter. There are so many major outside actors who would either want to get involved or would need to get involved. It is. I mean, again, we talk about World War III a lot. I mean, that would be just by definition a world war. I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen, but again, just like with Ukraine, U.S. policy has pushed us much, much closer to the possibility of World War III again.
And seeing this as an attack on America, much like Osama bin Laden, if you believe, his motivations his open motivations for the 9/11 attacks were to provoke a response from the United States that would drain us of our resources and overextend the empire.
What an idiot.
Yeah. It seems like that might be Hamas.
He's a dumb Arab. What do you expect? They don't know better. He thinks he's gonna like make America like overspend or something and like overextend itself. And Oh, come on, dumbass Osama. Yeah, no, right. This is what's it's all coming to fruition. He was completely right, and his strategy is absolutely working. And sayonara. I mean, it's just a question of how long it's going to take. But this is another another major step down by the American empire.
But yeah, so if Hamas launches these attacks against Israel, Israel overreacts. The Arab world gets involved. There's already 2 United States aircraft carriers over there. All of a sudden, we don't have any allies in the Middle East anymore because of developments in BRICS and the war in Ukraine.
Yep.
And all of Europe is spent from supporting the war in Ukraine. So we don't have any allies in Europe either.
Yep.
And so this project that the United States is fanatically devoted to, it's like a bipartisan consensus, like AOC voted for the Iron Dome. So this possibly might be a last-ditch effort to completely drain the United States empire of all of its resources again, because that's what would have to happen to keep Israel running if it plays out like that.
So that's amazing that you say that, because draining the American empire is the goal of Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, of course. But guess who else have that as their goal? The Likud party and Benjamin Netanyahu. 3 or 4 years ago, he said, and I heard this from Alistair Crook, who is a major British diplomat who used to conduct hostage negotiations in Israel. So he knows a thing or two. He was in MI5. According to him, Netanyahu said, and this might even be public, several years ago, that when America is weakened, we will be able to establish the state of Israel on, they call it the land of Israel. To them, when they say the land of Israel, they mean including Gaza and the West Bank. Netanyahu and the government of Israel right now has as its mission the weakening of the United States of America so that it can remove and replace all the Palestinians in Palestine. So both Israel and the Arab world, broadly speaking, want the American empire to be weakened. Now, Israel doesn't want the American empire to go down entirely, and I don't even know exactly what Netanyahu wants, like how weak he wants the United States to be, but he does want them to recede a bit, at least from the region, so that he can do what he wants. Because Henry Kissinger, back in the 70s, he told the Israelis, we run this joint. You don't get uppity. Because after the 2 wars in 67 and 73, a lot of Israelis and pro-Israeli people were like, yeah, we run this joint. We're going to tell the United States what to do in terms of policy. And Henry Kissinger gave a speech to them. He was like, no. No, we run this, not you. And he gave a whole lecture about how Jews are self-destructive and self-serving and need to be told what to do. It's an amazing speech. 1975, the Klutznik Group speech by Henry Kissinger. So, and that's been the way it's been ever since. I mean, Israel has had a lot of influence, very powerful lobby, but they do not wag the dog. No, the United States makes decisions so far because they have been dominant, because Israel needs us with our $3 billion a year in bombs and money that we send to them, and all the intelligence help we give them and all that. So,
well, here's a question.
Yeah.
Israel is our greatest ally, as all of our senators and Congress people tell us. What have we gotten in return if we're really if we're the dog and they're the tail? What have we gotten in return?
An unsinkable aircraft carrier. That's what Alexander Haig called it during the Reagan administration. He said, Israel is our unsinkable aircraft carrier, meaning we can launch operations from Israel against the Arabs, which is what it's been. I mean, there have been many, many operations that have been launched, at least in part, from Israel. I mean, a lot of stuff happened through Israel during the Iraq War. I mean, all the wars in the Middle East, Israel's been a part of for us, and with us. And then it's also they border the Suez Canal. I mean, and half the world's oil goes through the Suez Canal. Most of that goes to Western Europe, goes to NATO countries, right? So that's of vital importance to the United States, strategic interest. So Israel is right there, standing guard. And the country that gets the second most foreign aid after Israel is Egypt, which is on the other side of the Suez Canal. America's not stupid. So they have 2 centuries that they're paying off to guard the oil supply to Western Europe in the Suez Canal. But other than that, nothing. There have been, of the 15,000 Israelis dead, a good chunk of those have been American. Many, many hundreds of Americans have died in Israel because of this project of Zionism. They get a lot of votes, friendly votes. The United States gets a lot of friendly votes in the United Nations. Israel always votes with the United States. It's helpful sometimes. You know, Mossad has cooperated a whole lot with our intelligence agencies throughout the Middle East. So lots of military assistance in that way. But again, that military assistance would be unnecessary and irrelevant if we didn't have a presence in the Middle East, because the Middle East wouldn't care about us. No, we've got nothing but death and trouble and lost treasure, billions and billions. It was 100 billion we had given Israel, like that was like a decade ago. So I don't even know what it is now, but it's way over $100 billion we've given Israel. And, you know, all their fighter jets and bombers are made in Seattle and Indiana and whatever. I mean, it's all American made stuff.
And yeah, the Biden response, what Biden tweeted was Israel has a right to defend itself. But what that was used was to justify like $6 billion in immediate emergency aid.
Yeah.
So
it's like, go ahead, defend yourself. Would never stand in their way, but I'm also not going to help them.
Total non-starter. Like,
yeah, right. It's like,
yeah.
Okay, you're coming to me, you're asking me to give them money. No, you're telling me to give them money. Okay, got it. Which is what that is. It's ridiculous. Yeah. Now I want to say some things though about some feelings though. You know, I mean, I've known lots and lots of people like Batya, like Barry Wise. I don't know Barry, but I've known many people like them. Barry was actually a student at Columbia when I taught there. She never took a class with me, and I know a lot of my students at Columbia are very much like her, secular, liberal, intellectual, professional, urban Jews who have tremendous emotional attachment to Israel and Israelis. And I mean,
well,
yes.
I want to say, stop acting like you're the only people who have a right to national identity and ethnic identity and ethnic pride, and that like there's this complete callousness towards all other genetic nationalism and ethnic feelings, and then immediately they're just so tribal about this issue. Is what I want to take it.
I want to take it seriously, though.
No, I get it. I just don't like that
steel manning.
Yeah.
No, I know, but I mean, I want to try to understand the feeling. And I mean, listen,
I understand it.
I was married into basically 2 different families that were both that were just like Jewish, pro-Israel. I mean, I know these people. So anti-Semitism is sort of special in that, yes, the Jews until 1948 were essentially the only stateless people on the planet, historically stateless, historically persecuted. And the Holocaust was just the culmination of that. You know, we all know about the pogroms in Eastern Europe and other such atrocities. That stuff's not made up. And yes, the Jews were enslaved. You know, the Bible says so, and that's true too, and enslaved for centuries. So they also, even in the modern West, in Europe and Britain and America, just in the last 100 years, there has been considerable anti-Semitism that would not, nothing like that has happened to me if people think that I'm just white. But if they knew I was Jewish, would have historically, I mean, not now, but historically would have absolutely affected me. People were kept from colleges. There were quotas against Jews in all the Ivy League schools when Jews were, the smartest students often. There was some violent anti-Semitism, not a lot, but some of that, but it's real. And the mostly in the American establishment, the political class, until recently, anti-Semitism was normal. And this is why during World War II, it's one reason why, during World War II, Franklin Roosevelt and the State Department refused to allow any Jewish refugees into the United States from Nazi Germany. They were that anti-Semitic, and they went on and on about it, about how disgusting these Jews from Germany were. And they would never be allowed in a place like America because they were so filthy and undisciplined. So this is a real thing, and it's different than other racisms, and it's different than anything that any WASP has experienced. And the thing about it that Jews will often remind you of, and they're right, is that anti-Semitism has been its most violent when Jews have been the most established, the most well-off, the wealthiest, and the most powerful, like 1932 Berlin. Half the doctors in Berlin in 1932 were Jewish, just the doctors, and of course the bankers too. I mean, they had a lot of power, a lot of influence, and look what happened to them. So it could happen even now, even though you look around now and you're like, what could ever happen to American Jews? These are like the wealthiest, most powerful people in the world. But no, I mean, if it could happen then, why couldn't it happen, or something could happen here? It hasn't happened ever in the US. There's never been a real pogrom here. There's never really been. I mean, there was that synagogue shooting a few years ago in Pittsburgh. That's about it in terms of actual pogroms. But I do want to say it is special. It is something, because Jews have been stateless historically, have been very much identified as being rootless and stateless, and therefore suspect always. This is real. I mean, these are real things that have really happened, and they could come back at any time. And there is an anti-Semitic undercurrent in American culture. You don't see it much, but it's there. And with the internet, we have found out that it's a significant number of people. I don't think they have any power, those people, but it's out there. So that sentiment could grow theoretically, and it has grown in other places and other times that have resulted in the deaths of many Jews. So including my ancestors. I'm descended from Ukrainian Jews from Odessa who were, wiped out entirely in World War II. There's that. To hear millions of people in the Middle East, Arabs, right? It is absolutely normal to be violently anti-Semitic among Arabs in the Middle East. It's totally normal to be totally anti-Semitic. And then, even if you do understand what Gaza is, even if you do understand the history that I laid out, and you completely sympathize with those poor people in Gaza and what's been done to them, and Palestinians in general, we are talking about civilians. And I don't know how many children have been killed, but apparently there at least were some, even if they weren't beheaded. And, and that was done at least partly with some anti-Semitic intent. Now, again, the origin of the anti-Semitism is something we need to understand, but nonetheless, it doesn't matter. Like, that's special. If they were just regular old white waspy people in there in Israel living in there, I don't think it would go down in the same way. The hatred of Jews, it has a special flavor because of anti-Semitism in among Arabs, I think. So these are reasons to take it seriously. And then, of course, there's the good old Holocaust, which has been manipulated to death. And this is Norman Finkelstein's great book about the Holocaust industry, he calls it. Has it been exploited in the service of promoting Israel and at the expense of Palestinians since 1948? Yes, but it did happen. Not 6 million, but definitely many, many people were killed. The United States was in large part responsible for it, but still many, many Jews were killed. Hitler did not intend to kill Jews until the United States entered the war, but still he did kill millions of Jews. That really did happen. That happened not really that long ago. 20 years before I was born, it was happening. Jews were being gassed 20 years before I was born. So I understand. I understand on the most basic level people's feelings, especially people like Batya, Barry Weiss, people I have known in my life whose family members have tattoos on their arms from the camps, you know, and I've met these people and I've seen the tattoos. It's real. So, you know, I get it. Even if the Palestinian cause is wholly justified, to see Jews being murdered like this, and for it to be voiced, at least in part, as an anti-Jewish operation, clearly hit some understandable nerves. I get that. I really, really do. My argument is that if you're an Israel, if you're an American, you just simply cannot support Israel if you value Jewish life, if you value Palestinian life, certainly, but even Jewish life. If you're an Israeli, I don't know, but it's also not my responsibility. My ancestors, my Jewish ancestors, did not choose Zionism. They chose to move to Chicago instead. And that's why Noah Koenigsberg, my grandfather, lived to a ripe old age. But I mean, a lot of Israelis have family in Europe. A lot of them spend a lot of time in Europe. I mean, I would leave if you can. If you can't leave, then press as hard as you can for a two-state solution. But really, you're going to have to stop excluding Palestinians from civil rights and citizenship in Israel. I mean, it's as basic as that. It is an apartheid state. It is, by definition, a racist ethno-state. You cannot become a citizen of Israel if you are not Jewish. It's like amazing that this is even debated, why we should support a racist state whose very definition is racist. But ultimately, I think, you know, people will not ever accept that. I think Palestinians and Arabs will just simply never accept that. That's true. Yeah, you're right. They will not accept the existence of the state of Israel because the state of Israel is racist. That excludes them from being citizens, from owning property on that beautiful ocean front there that Israel has. Notice that they took the best property on the Mediterranean. I mean, until they do that, until they give right of return to the Palestinians who were displaced, like those people who live in Gaza, and until they give them full civil rights within the state of Israel, there will be justification for rebellion. There will absolutely be, by our standards in the West, because it's a racist regime, it just is, there will be justification for rebellion, which means there probably will be rebellion until they do that. Now, the problem is, when they do that, when they give right of return to all the Palestinians and then give them civil rights and voting rights, the state of Israel will be voted out of existence. The majority will no longer be Jewish. So the state of Israel will effectively no longer exist. They know that. We know that. That's the fundamental problem. And there's going to be death until that is resolved. But that is something that is going to take possibly generations, if not centuries, to resolve. This is why so many of us are in despair about it. But I do know that I don't want to support it anymore. And that's the position that makes sense to me. So
my position is that now is a good time for everybody to educate themselves and watch the episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm, where Larry David goes to a Palestinian restaurant and courts a beautiful Palestinian waitress.
Yeah.
And yeah, rethinks everything you thought about his identity.
You know, love can get us there. I mean, miscegenation, there's a lot to be said for that. And I really mean that. It can solve all of our racial and ethnic conflicts. Fucking can do it. Not love. Love's okay, but sex is way better. I agree. And on that note, take our course on Israel and Palestine at Unregistered Academy. It's on the front page. Starting next Wednesday, one session course. We're going to cover the whole history. We're going to mount every argument, steelman every argument. Even though I clearly have my own positions, I am going to present every important argument for Israel that's ever been made. So go to Unregistered Academy right there. You'll see it on the front page. Click it, and I'll see y'all next Wednesday, hopefully. Michael, right now we're going to go to Unregistered Live. So that's for patrons of the show. Go to patreon.com/unregistered right there. Become a patron at any level. And every Thursday after Unreported, Michael and I hang out in a Zoom meeting with all the patrons for an hour and a half. We chill, we talk, we get crazy, we talk about everything. It's a lot of fun. So join us. Michael, thank you. You are the man.
Yeah. I'm going to play us out with the Pat Buchanan clip.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
The great Pat Buchanan.
Love him. Bye.
The Israelis have been hit for 6 months with these little rockets, which didn't kill anybody. It was outrageous, cruel, and stupid, and they triggered a blitzkrieg against the Palestinians in Gaza, which in my judgment is an Israeli concentration camp where 1.5 million people are locked up, cannot come out or go in. They've been controlling food, electricity, fuel, and the innocent people in Gaza are the ones suffering.
Concentration camp, Pat, doesn't that diminish the significance of the real concentration camps?
No, I'm not talking about a death camp. I'm talking about what the British had in concentration camps in South Africa, and what the Spanish had in Cuba, and what others have had, where they bring all these people, lock them in there, and treat them with great cruelty and a humanitarian disaster, despite what Zippy Livni says. Well, let me tell you. I tell you how you create people for Hamas. You kill 675 people, you wound and injure 3,000. What do you think the brothers and sisters, those 5 little girls that died, what are they going to be when they grow up? What are these people under this, treated like this?
You know.
Look, why do you think the Palestinians...
You know and I know that Hamas's doctrine, we can talk about it right here,
I know their
is to
doctrine.
hide in schools, in mosques, to hide among the civilians and use civilians for shields. And you know it is a war crime to use civilians for shields. You should be criticizing those war crimes on the part of Hamas.
Look, Hamas, any war crimes, I criticize their attacks with those rockets, stupid and cruel. But you sit here and tell me that the Israeli people or the Israeli nation have treated the Palestinian people with any kind of justice. Those towns hit by the rockets are former Palestinian towns.
Well,
Ashkelon, Ashdod,
well, speaking of justice,